And also joining Tori is Alfred, her service dog. Tori brought this case to the Minnesota Department of Human Rights along with her attorney, who's joining us here today as well, Chad Wilson from the Disability Law Center. With us also is David Dively from the Minnesota Council on Disability. Thank you all for being here and for the work that you do every day. We'll be providing some comments and then taking any questions that you might have. So I'd like to start by talking broadly about Minnesota. Now, Minnesota's leadership on civil rights has not been a linear path. Our history is filled with nuance, with missteps, and dark and painful moments. And in the face of every challenge, Minnesotans have declared since the very inception of the state that civil rights are foundational to Minnesota. Thanks to this shared commitment, this shared bipartisan commitment by Minnesotans, we have one of the strongest civil rights laws in the country. Now, the purpose of the Minnesota Human Rights Act is to prohibit discrimination across the board, at work, schools, at coffee shops, beyond, and of course, today, talking Lyft as well, and all transportation companies, rideshare companies, and taxis. Despite this law, Tori's case is really all too common. Like I mentioned, Tori, through the Disability Law Center, filed a complaint with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, alleging several drivers denied and canceled her scheduled rides because she was traveling with her service animal, Alfred. Now, after a thorough investigation, we found that Lyft did violate the Minnesota Human Rights Act. We found that Lyft's drivers, repeatedly canceled rides because Tori was traveling with her service animal. And Tori will share with you directly how this impacted her. Here's what you need to know about the settlement agreement today. First, it requires and memorializes improvements to policies, driver education, and updates to the Lyft Act. Second, it strengthens accountability for drivers who violate these policies by clarifying that they may be deactivated and unable to keep driving for Lyft if they violate the law. Third, the agreement contains a monetary settlement. And importantly, fourth, the Department of Human Rights will monitor Lyft's compliance with the settlement agreement for the next 3 years. I want to extend my appreciation to Lyft for working to prevent and end discrimination every day. While this agreement is specific to Lyft, we expect that all riders in Minnesota, and in fact across the United States, will benefit from these changes to policy and accountability. So for riders, here's what you need to know. You have a right to ride. By law, rideshare company drivers cannot cancel or refuse a ride to you, even if you have a wheelchair, service animal, and or are blind or low vision. For drivers, here's what you need to know. It's the law. You cannot cancel or refuse a ride because a rider has a wheelchair, a service animal, because they are low or blind or low vision, Service animals, importantly, this is important for drivers to know, are not pets. They are service animals, and it is the law. Businesses operating in Minnesota must follow the Minnesota Human Rights Act. MDHR will continue to use all tools available to enforce state law because we know that families, communities, and businesses are all at our very best when we see each other's humanity and actively work to prevent and end discrimination every day. So thank you, Tori, for being here today and sharing your story and help make sure that Minnesota can build a better, more accessible future. I'll turn the mic over to you at this time.
Thank you. My name is Tori Andrews. I'm a college student, an athlete, and a guide dog handler. I have been a guide dog handler for 7.5 years, and this case is a deeply personal thing to me because I travel pretty much everywhere with my guide dog. He is my eyes, he is my freedom, and he is why I am able to live independently. When Lyft drivers deny a rider simply because they don't want the rider's dog in their car, it affects me personally on the level of being frustrated because I know my laws, that I know my rights, I know the laws, I know what I am able to do with my guide dog. It is one of the pivotal things that every training school introduces to a service dog handler. It's also hard because I need to get where I need to go at specific times, like anyone. And when Lyft drivers deny you a ride, you end up missing appointments, being late, or just not going at all. And that's what I have dealt with 7 times over the last 4 years. It's been very frustrating, and I'm very thankful that the Department of Human Rights has actually listened to this case, because Lyft didn't want to go anywhere with it, but once the department got involved, we were able to make these changes, and I'm hoping that these changes will help myself, but also help the other service dog handlers in the state. This is something that I am not willing to give up on and not willing to end this fight on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tori. I'll turn it over to Chad.
Hello, my name is, oops, trying to figure out this mic here. Hello, my name is Chad Wilson. I'm an attorney with the Minnesota Disability Law Center, which is part of Minnesota Legal Aid. I have brown hair, I'm wearing a charcoal suit, a white shirt, and a striped blue and gray tie. So, as I said, I'm an attorney with the Minnesota Disability Law Center, and we are the protection and advocacy organization for the state of Minnesota, looking out for the welfare of people with disabilities throughout the state. We provide free civil legal services to people with disabilities on legal issues related to their disabilities. And we represented Tori in her disability discrimination charge against Lyft with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. Tori's case highlights a problem in our office we see far too often. Individuals with disabilities being denied access to transportation services or other public services simply because they're accompanied by a service animal. This was not an isolated event for Tori. As she noted, this happened to her multiple times, showing how common these barriers still are for people with service animals. In Tori's experience, and in countless other cases our office has worked on, drivers have refused outright to provide services to people with disabilities simply because they have a service animal with them. In other cases we have worked on, we've seen multiple excuses provided by different transportation providers and drivers, such as the animal sheds, we don't want to deal with that, or incorrectly insisting that the individual needs to provide some type of license or certification or paperwork to prove that it's a service animal. None of these justifications are lawful. So let me be very clear. Under both Minnesota law and federal law, no documentation is required for an individual to travel with a service animal when using ride shares, taxis, or other public transit. Specifically, a driver or transportation provider can only ask 2 questions. Is this animal required because of a disability? And what task or work has that animal been trained to perform? That's it, there's nothing more. That should be the end of the inquiry if both of those questions can be asked. Our hope is that Tori's case will raise awareness across Minnesota that denying access to people with disabilities because they are accompanied by a service animal is not only harmful, but it is illegal. People with disabilities have the right to participate fully in their communities, and the law is clear that service animals must be accommodated. If there's one message that this case deserves to have attention of, it's that no one should ever be turned away for rides simply because they are accompanied by a service animal.
Hello everyone, my name is David Dively. I'm the Executive Director at the Minnesota Council on Disability. the state's independent disability policy training and technical assistance agency. I want to say thanks mostly of all to Tori, who's, we're all here because of her and unfortunately the discrimination she experienced, but also our colleagues at the Department of Human Rights and Commissioner Lucero and Chad Wilson, attorney from our wonderful partners at the Disability Law Center. The topic of service animals gets usually either our first or second most hits on our website for technical resources, and is easily top 5, if not the biggest, for phone calls and emails that we get. There's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of challenges that people with disabilities experience around this, but I want to focus on a couple things specific to transportation. This is specific to on-demand transportation. There are several options that people have in the disability accommodation space for pre-scheduled or far in advance scheduled appointments. But that's not always practical or feasible for people. So having real, dependable, functional transportation is critical. And it's not just using an app or getting a car ride. It's actually going to your job, being able to vote, be a part of your community, visit your friends and family on your own, at your own time of choosing where you want to go, which also means you can live where you want to live without having to worry about specific routes or other things. Service animals are vital disability supports for many people. It supports people's autonomy, the ability to take control and charge of their own life, and have equal access to public spaces and accommodations. Service animals, a civil right, should be seen like other disability supports, not something that's a luxury or something that people have the perk or benefit of using. This is just one step forward that we're taking today. We at the Council on Disability look forward to continuing to make our transportation and rideshare systems increasingly accessible, with more to come down the road. And again, we want to thank our partners at Human Rights, our attorney Chad Wilson and Tori Andres here, for reaching this critical settlement that will impact not just Minnesotans, but people all over the country.
Thank you for speaking here and sharing how access to ride shares like Lyft is not a convenience. It is in fact a civil right. Are there any questions?
When you first started this process with Lyft, did you get the sense that they began working in good faith to correct the problem or crack down on the drivers, or did you face resistance?
Broadly speaking, when somebody like Tori submits allegations of discrimination with our agency, what we do is we work to gather all of the information and conduct a neutral fact-finding investigation to make a determination. It's at that time, once we make a determination, that we work with them to see if a settlement can be reached, because we want to prevent discrimination across the board. We are here today because Lyft agreed to all of these changes. We appreciate that they're moving forward with these changes. It will benefit all Minnesotans.
Was there an actual lawsuit here, or did you reach a settlement without having to go that route?
We conducted our investigation and found probable cause of discrimination, and we were able to reach a settlement without filing a lawsuit today. I think that is better for everyone in Minnesota.
You've talked about how this applies nationally. Can you walk us through that a little bit more, why it applies beyond Minnesota?
Thank you so much for your question there. It has benefits that will impact people across the country because Lyft has made several changes to its policies across the board. And its training, and then they've updated their app pretty substantially. You can find information about those changes to their app both on their website, and we've provided information about it on our website as well. It teaches drivers the questions they can and cannot ask to identify service animals, and every driver across the country is going through these updated trainings. So the impact is felt nationally.
Do the updated trainings and policies also apply to Lyft's competitors, Uber, and other rideshare companies?
Yeah, the question is, does it apply to other rideshare companies? So the Minnesota Human Rights Act applies to every business in Minnesota, including all rideshare and transportation companies. This settlement in particular is resolving this case that was brought here today, but the law applies.
So to be clear, the updated Lyft policy about, which they say is like an opt-in feature, maybe for drivers to disclose that on their, if you're requesting a ride, that is directly a change that stemmed from this lawsuit, which was ultimately settled out of court, this case.
Here's what I can tell you. These policy and changes were not in place when this case was being investigated. It was not in place when we found our probable cause of discrimination. And so the many factors that might have led to them making these changes, including cases and complaints from all across the country, have us here today. And we have memorialized these changes into our settlement agreement, and importantly, we're tracking that for the next 3 years to make sure they're followed and implemented with fidelity.
Have you received any similar complaints then against Uber, and have you had any discussions with them about their policies regarding service animals?
And thank you for that question. So we regularly receive complaints and allegations of discrimination around disability. In fact, it is always one of our top reasons why people are contacting our office. It's about 40%, 45% of our cases that come in are disability cases. We have lots of cases that are against rideshare companies, a variety of rideshare companies. And you hear different things, like a driver saying something like, we won't take anyone with dogs in this vehicle. And just asking, are you the person there with the service animal? And then just canceling the ride outright. And so this is a much bigger problem, and we're hoping that this case demonstrates that there needs to be better policies and training. We recommend that all businesses use this as an opportunity to look at their policies, training, and accountability systems to make sure that it's being enforced correctly.
I know some people testified in a committee last week about a bill on autonomous vehicles. Waymo wants to come here, and they talked about how they think it's a really great option and accommodating option for people with disabilities. You talked about that this case, of course, is related to Lyft, but could have broader implications. Is there a discussion about that for autonomous vehicle companies that might operate here? And would that need to be explicitly written, or is it different because it's not a person behind the wheel who would deny somebody a ride?
Yeah. I'll speak broadly that every business in Minnesota that's providing it's called public accommodations, any services, must follow the Minnesota Human Rights Act. And so that would be the starting point for that conversation. The specifics of the bill, I'm gonna work through the legislative process at this time.
You mentioned that you'll be monitoring this for 3 years. What does that aspect of that look like?
Yeah, thank you so much. So the details are that they have to report to the Department of Human Rights every single time that rides are denied, so we can track what's going on there and why, and what additional accommodations were provided at that time. So we can see if we need to further intervene. We'll track to make sure those trainings are happening. We've been working with them to look at their updates to their app to make sure that they're in compliance. So just really want to make sure that they're following the law correctly.
Would updates to their policy within that 3-year span, would that be made publicly available, or is that something that's going to be kept in-house?
I'm not sure. I think I would defer to Lyft to see if their policies are publicly posted. They do have lots of information that they've updated about service animals and additional training. Specific policy terms, I would defer to them.
Have all of the changes been implemented, or are there some still to come?
I believe that the settlement terms are being put into place, like training is ongoing, and of course the 3 years of enforcement is ongoing. So at this point, the case is still open and we're still working on it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.